Some of you have been asking on an update of our house, and today I have an update on our kitchen. Hey there, my name is Yami. I am your Latina next door. Welcome back to mi casa. Today I'm talking about our kitchen and what we have done since our last update on it. So here's everything that has gone on. One of the most exciting things that we have done is that we have got our countertops installed. But before I get started, I'm going to share some quick information from today's sponsor. Today's video is sponsored by Home Outlet. As you all may know, we have partnered with them throughout the construction of our home in order to finish off some of our most important spaces like our kitchen and our bathrooms. You can select from many products and services available in their store so that your next renovation or home build project goes as smoothly as possible. Through Home Outlet, we were able to make selections for tile, flooring, and even our cabinetry for our kitchens and bathrooms. The process for selecting our countertops was super easy. They have many options for surfaces depending on which your style is, and they even put you into contact with their local vendors who they work with in order to get you the countertop that you desire. You can easily find if there is a Home Outlet store near you using their store locator page on their website. Now remember, if you're in the Fort Worth area, they also have a sister store called Seconds and Surplus. Make sure to check them out for your next home improvement project. I'll have their information in the description box below. The process of getting our countertops installed was actually very easy. I had previously selected the types of countertops that I wanted for my home at the actual Home Outlet store. And then Home Outlet put us into contact with their local vendor who they work with in order to get the measurements and the countertops manufactured. Now they came out very quickly in order to measure our cabinetry for the countertops. The only thing that we needed to make adjustments on was the Farmhouse sink. Luckily, Nelson had installed this with a kit that you can use in order to rise and lower the actual Farmhouse sink, and we made sure that there was enough front portion of the Farmhouse sink that stuck out as it should be in order for the countertop to look the way it should when it's installed. And again, the gentleman was really nice and patient with us, giving us tips and pointers of how, we should go about doing this in order for it to fit perfectly fine when it was finally manufactured and installed. Now, when we were sure that everything was in place and perfect, he began to do the measurements. And honestly, this is the first time that I've ever seen this little machine that he has with him. He has got an attachment with a pen-like instrument at the very end, where he places a pen-like instrument on different sections of the cabinetry, basically mapping out what the final countertop is going to look like, as well as taking in measurements based on the data that he had previously put in. And we can actually see the form take shape on the actual screen of his little machine there. And it was actually pretty cool to see because we had never seen anyone use that in previous countertop replacements that we have had in other homes. Now, once he was done, it was back to us. We had to get those cabinets ready before the countertop installation. We got our spacers. This is our 6-inch spacer, and then we have these two other 3-inch spacers. Now, those we had ordered because we need to build a frame. Originally, we had not done this in the design, but after we had everything up here and we put those posts right there, we wanted to frame it out like our previous island to give the countertop that hangs over that ledge a little bit more support. So we ordered these 3-inch ones right there, and it's supposed to connect from here to the post. And then we have a longer one that goes across, and then another one that obviously that comes back around this way. So Nelson actually came up with a really good idea. Many of you suggested from our previous video to rip this one down and put one on either side of this cabinet so it looks a little bit more even. And that was something that did occur to me after the fact. But Nelson was thinking, since we have these two and they have finished sides on both sides, why don't we use this on either side of the cabinet? And then this one we can rip down in 2 different ones and then use those for right here, because the unfinished edge can go underneath where the countertop's gonna lay, so you won't see that. In addition though, because this is exactly 6 inches, if he rips it down the middle, it's not gonna be exactly 3 inches after he removes, or separates the pieces. So he did say it wouldn't be the exact size. So that's what we're gonna do. That was a great idea of his. I'm glad he thought of that before we did anything. And so we're gonna cut these down, and we're gonna put this on either side of here, and then this, we're gonna cut this down in 2 and then use those for the bracing on the sides right here between the posts. So that's our plan.
And I do want to say, yes, we know if we would have just got all 3-inch spacers, we wouldn't have had to rip anything. But at the time, we were just ordering spacers to get everything handled and fixed. And we thought of that after the fact, so we're just going to do what we have. So don't come after us with like, well, why didn't you just do, you know what, this is how we're handling it.
So Nelson got to ripping down that 6-inch spacer right away, as well as cutting down those 3-inch spacers in order to fit with the cabinetry. And if you're new here and you're wondering why on earth are we adding these spacers in this island this way, it's basically because this was my very first time designing a kitchen of this magnitude completely from scratch. And I made a small mistake on the island measurements when I was selecting the cabinetry for the front and the back of the island. And they just didn't add up, and one side was 6 inches shorter than the other. Obviously, it's the side that we're working on right here and adding these spacers. If we hadn't done this, the island would be off center, as well as the sink would be off center, and it would not line up with the center of the kitchen. And it's just a whole deal. I do go over it much more in detail in my previous kitchen video, where I say I made a mistake, and I kind of share exactly what it looks like and what the issue is, if you guys want to check that out. But Nelson and I were able to make the changes, and we were able to get everything to work perfectly fine. And we're happy that we ended up using 2 3-inch spacers where this cabinet was, so that it didn't look like there was a panel there filling up space. Once we were done with the middle spacer, we went to the one on the side, and we had to add extra bracing along the entire wall of that cabinetry because the wall was being pushed out, and we needed several points of contact for when we place the outer panel to cover everything up on the side of the island. So that's what we're doing right here, where you see us measuring and adding these white pieces of trim. So again, we have places of contact for the exterior panel that's going to go up. The tweaks to the other side of the island weren't as extensive as the right. We did replace a temporary piece of trim that we had, keeping the opening of the dishwasher space open, and we did replace it with a spacer that was already stained with the bottom cabinetry stain, so that everything looked nice and seamless and finished. So we did do that, and then we also added 3-inch spacers on the other side of the island, the one that faces the opposite side, and then we made sure that those were nice and secure. Again, the exterior portion of this side of the island will also have a panel, so you won't see any screws or any of the interior pieces of trim or work that's holding up the frame of the island. Next, it was time to install these posts. Now, this was a bit nerve-wracking because we only have 2 of them, so we have to get this right both times. These are actually a little bit taller than the cabinets that were on the island, so we had to cut these down. So we had to measure, remeasure, and make sure we were making the right cut and exactly where it needed to be for its height to line up with the height of the cabinets, so that when the countertops would be laid down, everything would be nice and even. So Nelson is very particular when it comes to this, and he measures and remeasures and makes sure that everything is lined up before he even starts that saw. So in order to add a little bit more stability to these posts, we wanted to put these spacers in between the cabinetry and the post. And we thought the best way to connect them would be using some pocket holes so that you did not see them from the outside. We started by attaching this piece to the main cabinet section of the island. And then we had to determine exactly where the posts were going to go on the floor. We used a laser in order to line up the edge of the post to the edge of the cabinetry on the main island section. And then using the distance between the cabinets as well as the post with that spacer touching right on it but not installed, we were able to put the post exactly where we wanted it. And then I came in with some painter's tape in order to mark off the perimeter of the bottom of the posts. Now, we don't know if this is how the professionals do it, but this is how we're doing it. Nelson wanted to make sure to put some bolts into our cement slab, and so that we could secure those posts as best as possible. These are two corners of the end of a very large island, and you can walk all the way around it. So there is potential in the future at some point for something to hit a corner or somebody to kick a corner accidentally. And so we didn't want anything to shift. We didn't want anything to break. We didn't want anything to move at all. So that's the purpose of this. He secured the bolts into the ground, and then we began to drill the holes inside the posts in order for them to line up. Again, something else that's a little bit nerve-wracking is that we only have one shot at this and we have to do it right. So we had to make sure that we got the centers of the posts as well as the centers of the markings on the floor to line up just perfectly. So this took us a little bit, and we also wanted to make sure we got the depth of the actual hole that gets drilled inside of the post. So we were taking our time. This is really hard wood also, so Nelson had to take it slow on the drilling. And of course, you get to see a little bit of smoke there just because of all the friction. But we would do a little bit of drilling. We would clean out the area just to take a good look inside and see exactly how far we had gone in, make sure we didn't go too far. And then we just double check with all of the pieces to make sure that everything fit properly. So we got one post done, and then we're now doing the second one. The final thing we had to do in order to get these posts nice and secure was to add the final piece on the front. And that was again attached using some pocket holes and of course the help of one of our kids. Now, because Nelson and I are doing so many different things throughout the house during the construction process, we barely were done by the time the countertops were ready. These guys were really fast. And this is what we were able to accomplish. And this is how those posts look, all connected to the island. And we still have the side panels to install, but that's perfectly fine. That wasn't necessary for this. Now, they started with the perimeter cabinets, as you can see in the background, and I did go with a quartz for my countertops. I love white. I love nice, clean white countertops, and I like that they really are no fuss. They are low maintenance, and they just look absolutely beautiful. And if you're wondering if my stomach was tied up in knots and if my heart was beating excessively during this entire process, you would be right, because countertop installation is actually pretty nerve-wracking. These pieces are huge. They're super heavy. And there's always, the fear that it might break. And so luckily these guys were great. They got this done. They were able to slide it on this huge island because that is a pretty big slab of stone. And it just worked out perfectly in the end. And then once the countertop was nice and secure and we were happy with the placement, it was time to drill the holes for the faucet. And that's another very nerve-wracking situation because you want to make sure you get them exactly where you want them, because it's just a one-try type of thing and you got to get it right. However, the entire experience was great. Everything went smoothly. The countertops look amazing, and we can continue on with the rest of the work. Now, because of how I designed the kitchen cabinetry as well as the two-tone cabinets where the white was on top and the wood was on bottom, we had to wait for the countertops to be installed so that we can continue adding our trim that goes around the fridge as well as the rest of the upper cabinets on this particular wall. So that's what we're doing right here. These two cabinets right here are the ones that go over the refrigerator. And then there's a panel that comes down on either side that touches or sits on the countertops. And then there's two more that go to the right of those. Now, as for the backsplash, I knew I wanted something that had a nice pattern to it and it didn't have a very busy design. I also wanted to use subway tiles, but I didn't want to use the subway tiles in any of the other ways that we use subway tiles in our home. We have them in all the bathrooms and they're each done in a different pattern. So for this one, I decided to go with the herringbone. Now these tiles are very rustic in nature and they're made to look like they're handcrafted. They have varying color as well, so you will see a slight change in the color throughout the pattern, which I think is very nice because even though it's there, it's still quite subtle. If you notice, these tiles are actually very similar in color to the color that I picked on the walls. So it doesn't distract from the rest of the kitchen. It still has its own pattern and it's very eye-catching when you see it, but at the same time, it's not very loud and just, too bold. I also decided to go with a very light grout color to kind of have everything blend in nice and smoothly. I didn't want any dark grout in order to emphasize the pattern too much on the backsplash. So as Nelson is reinstalling some of the cabinet doors that were removed for the install, you can see on either side of him the actual finished tile work and how it kind of blends seamlessly with the wall, yet it still shows you that pattern and the variation in the tile. Now, I was definitely happy when all of the cabinets were finally installed. Now it was time to put the refrigerator in here. First, we needed to install the hose so that we can hook up the water system in our refrigerator so that we can get water from our fridge. Nelson set it in place and yes, it did fit. And then I came in and began to remove all of the plastic and the tape from all of the interior shelving and drawers of the fridge. I definitely can appreciate the extent to which they wrap these refrigerators up because obviously they want to make sure that they get to their destination in one piece and nothing is broken or scratched on the inside. But oh my goodness, it can be very time consuming removing all of that tape. And we also were able to install my stove, which I am really excited about. We were able to get a propane tank so I can get to use a gas stove again, and I also got my dual ovens. So that is where we are on our kitchen right now. We still have to add the outlets on either side of the island, as well as adding those final finishing panels, which shouldn't take us too long, but we've been dealing with so many other things during the time that we just kind of haven't gotten to it yet. We also need to finish the crown molding at the top. We need to move the vent that's too close to the cabinetry so that we can put the crown molding up. We need to add the outlets underneath the cabinetry. I only have one outlet in the entire kitchen. It makes things a little challenging, but I am grateful for the space and being able to actually use the kitchen in the meantime. And then of course we have to add the lighting over the island, which I still have not been able to figure out what I want. I am also trying to finalize the cabinet pulls. It's very difficult pulling the cabinets without any pulls, but I want to make sure that I make the right decision because I'm not sure whether or not I like what I have, and I want to make sure that I don't have to change them in the future. And I feel like I'm giving myself a lot of pressure on this, but I'm not sure yet. But yeah, at least we are in the house and we're using the spaces and everybody is a little bit more comfortable. We are not 100% moved in. We still have a lot of unpacking to do, and we're trying to do it little by little just because there's so many things that we have to do for the rest of the house that we need to finish. So yeah, that is the update for this week. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please let me know what your thoughts are and give this video a like. Thank you so much to Home Outlet for sponsoring today's video, and I will see you back here in the next one. Until then, adios.